Hey, I'm Stephen Scott from Big Mouth Audio. Welcome to the Creative Leaders Podcast. Okay, Paula, thanks for joining us and welcome to the Creative Leaders Podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. We're just going to start off as we usually do on the podcast by asking you to give us your origin story and some insight into why you do what you do.
Okay, so I was born in Brazil and moved. So I have a fine art degree. Actually, I went to Duncan and Jordanston a long time ago. Did time-based art and had my sort of sights set on a career as sort of an art director or somewhere in the film industry. I'm a real movie buff, and yeah, just knew I wanted to sort of be in that sort of world. And having graduated with the fine art degree and nowhere to go, didn't know anybody, I was told sort of by one of my college peers that, you know, most people can get in starting work as a runner. And I didn't want to move to London because it was too scary and I was too poor. So I followed somebody to Glasgow and got a job in a post-production facility, Edit 123, as a runner. Was there for 6 months before got offered an opportunity to work in an advertising agency, which is a new world to me. But at this point, you know, after 6 months of running, anything will do. Yeah. So spoke to sort of the then head of TV, who said, you know, do you want to come and be my assistant? I'll have you producing within, 6 months. I went and I was producing within 2 months. So it was just brilliant world, live action. That they did a little bit of animation, and you just being sort of an advertising producer, you get to sort of touch every part of a production from, pre-pro casting, creative inception of the idea, right through to the broadcast. So it was fantastic to sort of really cut my teeth in that world. We were working with Scottish Power, and we were looking to do an animation campaign. And I'd heard of this studio called Axis, who were sort of just around the corner. And I thought, well, just get them in. Axis came in, did a pitch, and we pitched together to Scottish Power, won the campaign. And therein started a sort of a relationship that spanned many commercials, and yeah, that was really good. At that point, it must have been sort of in the early noughties. I think the advertising industry started to go into a bit of a decline, and my showreel at that point, I was still relatively new to the industry. And I could see my showreel's sort of quality just not really going anywhere. I would have to make a move. And at that point, the head of production at Axis had said, "Hey, we might have something. You want to jump over to the other side, the service side?" And I thought, "Oh, this could be exciting." Weirdly, I knew that loads of my art college peers were working there. So it was a really kind of strange situation, like linking up with everybody again. So I went to work for Axis as a freelancer in 2005. It was pretty much a baptism of fire because I had no experience working in animation, but I knew production. So I knew sort of how to get things done. But it was a real eye-opener at that point because all I knew from Axis was, the local regional commercials that we were doing, relatively low budget at that point as well. And then when I came in and they were like, "Oh yeah, we're working with Sony. We've just done the Killzone trailer." And they'd done some absolutely amazing stuff for, international audiences. And I thought, holy moly, like these guys are really not shouting loud enough about what it is that they're doing. They were also doing some commercials for London agencies, but again, everything, this was before YouTube, before really social media was a thing. So a lot of the stuff was pretty under the radar, and they didn't shout out about it. But when I came into Axis, they were just undergoing its first sort of major expansion. We were about to start work on Code Hunters, short film with Ben Hibben. And so I came aboard not to work on that show, but just to cover all the other projects that were going. So there was Skyfish commercials, there was BBC content, and there was these video game trailers that, they were constantly like bidding on and sometimes winning, sometimes not. But it was a real roller coaster ride. Most of the studio was occupied doing Code Hunters, so it was really sort of learn as you go. And the studio at that point didn't have an awful lot of systems. So I'm now the head of production. I should have said that before. So I'm now the head of production for the feature and episodic stuff. But I came in as a producer, into an environment where it was very much creatively led, and you could tell, because I was like, how do you track productions? And there was a little in the way of production tracking, the budgets. I was like, where's the detail? How does this break down? What are overheads? What are this? I was so green in that respect. But it was really great. They had an EP called Imperfection, who I think was my first real mentor. She had worked on, feature films like Valiant. She'd come in knowing, her stuff. And I thought, great, I can really learn from this person. They're in a career in, producing video games, trailers, producing commercials, working alongside, local advertising agencies and national advertising agencies, but really trying to push what we were doing, with the video games world. But at the core, I knew that the owners, like Dana, his goal was to produce, to make a feature film, which again, the original world I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in filmmaking. So I was like, I'll stick around with these guys a wee bit more, see where this leads. And it just kind of went on from there. Every time, I'm coming up to my 18th anniversary in a studio. And, every time I've thought, maybe now's the time to go, there's an opportunity that's come up. The work, obviously, you'll have, a lot of people are familiar with the work that we do now, from the Love, Death and Robots stuff to, the feature film that we did, Scrooge, to all the way back to, the commercials. And it's there's a lot of variety here. Again, that sort of touched on my love for the diversity. I liked advertising land because you were always getting that variety. If it wasn't TV, it was radio, and no project's the same. And I think it was a lot of the same with Axis. Even when it was doing game trailers, the look was the same. The partnerships the looks were different. The partnerships were different. The dynamics, and client handling and working with, directors, that varied from project to project. And it's something that I really enjoyed, with every show, is building that team, getting through it together. Because I think a lot of the times, it's almost like the bigger the mountain, the bigger the payoff. And I think for somebody working in production, it is a really tough career. You're constantly sort of treading that fine line between, what the creative needs and what the budget and schedule you've got, and, wearing lots of different hats, from, being somebody's agony aunt because they're having a tough time, and you want to get them through it, to being sort of the whipper of get things done and making sure that everybody keeps their eyes on the prize and keeping things on track. I think you've got to be of a certain disposition, and you've got to find a way to thrive under those circumstances. And I've seen it a lot, when it's not been a match for somebody. Part of my job now, which I'm only a year into the role. I avoided it for a long time because management, you do get this thing, leadership is different than management. And I thought I was always a good leader. And I knew I was a good leader, but I didn't always think I was a good manager, and I think it's something that just with experience, the more I've done it, the more you've seen sort of people come in, and also, some do amazingly and you're like, yeah, I want to take that, versus some people who come in and you're like, no, I wouldn't be doing it that way. I think you've got to it's a constant learning curve in adapting and just staying present and progressive, I think, as well. You can't just stick, I think it would be very easy to stick to what we knew or what I know as a studio. This is how I ran projects, 10 years ago. You've got to evolve because, the people are evolving, the work is evolving, the technology is evolving. But that's part of the excitement, that's part of the fun.
That's right, yeah. I mean, that must be quite a challenge in itself to go from a leadership role and sort of leading that team with a very firm idea of how you actually want to lead a project and how you want it to go to. I mean, I'm kind of guessing here, but if you then move to more of a management position, I imagine there's more hands-off and more delegating and sort of trying to get comfortable with maybe being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and for a control freak, that's not easy, and I think I am very, detailed oriented. Just I like things done right, and I think you've got to, a long time ago, I think, again, on some of the really tough shows that we've worked on, you learn that, you have to live with imperfection. It's okay for something to just be a little bit broken as long as you get the payoff. I think, what was it, Steve Jobs or something said, I saw this quote and I thought, this is so bang on. It's not always important to be right, but it's important to get it right. And I totally stand by that now. It's like on my projects, you lean on the expertise of the people. You need to listen to the team. You need to give them the opportunity. A lot of the times, with my production team, the coordinators or managers, we've had a clash of opinion of how something should be run. So, I've let them go, okay, let's do it your way. But if it doesn't work, we're my way. And sometimes it's worked their way and that's great, because that's something that I've then learned. But a lot of the times it hasn't. And this is when there's a lesson in there for them. And sort of, but it's not like a validation or anything, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to get the job done and get it done as effectively, as happily as you can. Because I think the key to sort of, I don't know, longevity in this industry and this role is finding that joy, and it's the experience. People stick around if the experience is good, and they don't if it's rubbish. And that applies to crew, that applies to clients, and creative leaders.
How do you approach that if it's a case of saying, okay, listening to your team and saying, okay, let's try it your way? Do you have like a kind of plan B or a set amount of time and before you have to then step in? I try and imagine it with animation. I always think, God, that must be an absolute nightmare because there's so many people and crew to to keep, So yeah, it'd be really interesting. Is it like how do you approach that, like in terms of how much time do you give them, or?
Yeah, everybody's different. I always have a plan B, C, D, E. Because it's so changeable, the environment, and all it takes is a piece of technology not working, or a piece of feedback coming in that you didn't expect, or somebody going off sick. There's so many variables that you constantly got to juggle, that what I always try and get is markers through the production timelines, so that, again, we're trying a new process. If at that point we're still not seeing it take, that's my cue to adapt. And so sometimes, depending on, again, where you are in the production, what's the bigger pain? Is it changing to make sure you get the right process, or is it actually just see through that final week? Yeah, it's rubbish, but let's just get this done. But again, the reason I like to work in the long format side of things is because I enjoy that time that you have to strategize, to sort of experiment a little bit more. I think the short format work, in commercials or trailers, the schedules are tighter, things overlap a lot more, and there's a lot less time to get it wrong and fix it. You're making decisions based on the facts that you've got at that time, and you got to hope that you make the right one. If you don't, you feel it really quickly, but again, you course correct as best as you can, and you don't always get it right. Nobody does. The important thing is just to respond to that, try and catch things early, so that you do have those opportunities to course correct. I think we are at Access quite an admin heavy studio comparatively, with other studios that I've heard of. People have come in from them. But that's really sort of what allows us to make the best decisions for the project, to make sure that budget ends up on screen. We track areas of the production, not only progress, not only scope, but team morale, client relationship, the team dynamics and partnerships, because everything plays into the successful running of a show, and that experience that you want to give to the team and to the clients as well.
And how much were you directly kind of involved or responsible for that, the implementation of that amount of admin and tracking? Because obviously, you mentioned before, when you joined Axis, they were more creative led. It sounds like at that time as well, kind of maybe even the focus of the business wasn't obviously where it is now, kind of doing little bits of everything. How directly were you involved in sort of shaping and changing the culture at Axis in terms of how projects are tracked and managed?
In the early days, a lot. So I was heavily involved. I think the producer tracker, Doc, has seen many iterations. We don't really use that now. We use a software, but we do use some of the old producer tracker for reporting. But I think I've seen it travel. People who have come and left, and are in other studios now and have taken the best bits, let's say, from them. But I definitely can't take credit for where the studio is at just now, and its production tracking via shot grids. I had nothing to do with that. That was all people that, heads of production that have been before me, who have done an amazing job, at really getting the studio to be able to cope with, the volume of work that we do, both in the short form and the long form. But yeah, I mean, we're at that point now that getting people to come in from the outside is a real plus, because, again, it just enriches, and it allows us to hone our processes. But also it does reassure us, actually, for all the complaints, that there is about documentation and everything, I've yet to come across somebody who's brought in and said, "Oh, we did it this way and it was perfect." I don't think even that, and we've had people come in, from DreamWorks, from DNEG, CineSite, big studios, and everyone's sort of living their own production chaos, organized chaos, if you like. And I think you just got to now back yourself, believe in what what we've got, set up as a studio, but keep pushing to drive, where can we improve? Where can we learn? Just to, again, make things more efficient and get the best out of people and the creative.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to kind of dive in a little bit more then into the sort of the sort of inner workings of the of tracking projects and stuff like that, but it might be a good place to start by actually asking you more about your current role. So obviously you spent a lot of time on the short form side of things, and as you mentioned, you're now head of production for features and long form projects. So yeah, walk us through a kind of typical day. I'm guessing there is no typical day, but it's I'll ask the question anyway. A typical day as a sort of head of production in a feature department at Access, what does that look like?
It's busy, very busy, but it's really exciting. I feel like it's where I'm meant to be, which is, again, really great to have those kind of feelings so far into my career and my Access journey. We, for a long time, we have been doing work on developing the sort of the development side of the studio, so originals and co-productions. So that's kind of a big part of what I do. So I oversee sort of the production side of developments, as well as service and in-house features and episodic content as well. So it involves me working really closely with our head of business development for features and episodic, and our executive producer, Andrew Pierce, who's over in LA at the moment. He's back next year, but has been out there for a couple of years to just really drive, business development, get those opportunities, get access, on the sort of in Hollywood, and get those connections. So it's really exciting because you're going into calls sometimes with, people who you sort of, oh my God, they're real bigwigs, and people that inspire me and inspire the team. And just to be sort of in that place where we're talking to them about, potential collaborations, is really exciting. I think on that's kind of all on the planning and development and, future and the present. So we're about sort of just over midway through our series for Marvel, and that's been, I mean, a real game changer for us, and it's consumed the vast majority of my time just to make sure that things are going as they should, to make sure that I can support the team and the production to the best of my ability, and that will typically involve removing as much noise from about the production as I can. Working with Marvel is, you're talking kind of ultra security, which is a different way of working in typical projects. That comes with a whole host of just, admin and logistics and infrastructure changes. All that has to be handled. So, and as well as that, the studio still, half of the studio is still making content, for the short form side. So there's a lot just linking, working with other heads of department, but trying to support the studio as much as possible to make sure that show runs as smoothly as it can and is the best that it can be. It does involve sort of, again, quite close collaboration at client level, normally at the start. But again, if ever kind of things, need another conversation, if we're maybe at an impasse on something, that's where I come into play, just to, again, alleviate that pressure for either the line producers and the EPs, and work towards the best solutions. So that's kind of my day to day. I'm also juggle that with being part of Animation Scotland. So I'm on the board there, and it is expansive because Scotland's got such an amazing animation community and a gaming community as well. And although Access doesn't do video games, it's still in our interest, to sort of align ourselves with that as an industry, because it's so close to what we do in terms of content creation. But it's about the community and the industry, and there's nothing I love more than, like, I'm a parent now. I have 2 kids, one in high school, one in primary school, and you get to talking to other parents, and and they're like, "What do you do?" And I'd say, "I work for an animation company, blah blah blah," and they're like, "Oh, my child's really into art, but I don't know whether to encourage that or not," And I'm like, "Please do."
Yeah.
It's such, we've come a long way from where, career viable, sort of decent, well-earning careers are in law or medicine or accountancy or what have you. The creative industry's got so much opportunity, and again, depending on where you go, you can make a really, really good living out of it. And I just don't think that's known. It's certainly not at grassroots. So I'm, trying to sort of get in there at, the high schools and primary schools, and just at this point, excite them, inspire them, show them that, at least from a local perspective, there's a studio right here in Glasgow that does, these amazingly international things. And every time I go in to do a talk at a school, I come out absolutely buzzing, and you just see the reaction that it's had, on the students, most of who never knew these types of careers even existed.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's crazy because there's been occasions where I can't think specifics, but I've been speaking to people and sort of mentioned, Access, or we've been doing this thing with Access, or do you know the Access, who they're a big animation studio? No, no. And I'm kind of like, it's crazy that one of the biggest animation studios in the world, and people just don't know the industry that we have here. And I think it's also, it seems like very slowly that there is a change of understanding of how valuable the creative industries are to the UK economy, and fingers crossed starting to see a little bit more investment there. But it's interesting because we quite often ask guests on this podcast, guests from the animation side, about their involvement with grassroots, but more in terms of universities. But it raises a great question about getting in there a little bit earlier with schools. My oldest is in P2 now, and he just loves drawing. You can already see that he doesn't want to be at school. He wants to be creative. At least that's what I'm thinking, anyways. And then the other day I picked him up from school, and the first thing he said to me is, "Can we go and make a game?" He thinks he can just kind of, make a game in an hour sort of thing. And it does feel like there's not really the same emphasis at that age, primary school and secondary school, of, encouraging the arts and the creative industries. Is it something, how involved, are Access, or you specifically, in sort of in the educational side of things?
So we do have a person dedicated to higher education and making those connections, John Mortimer, and he's done a phenomenal job so far. And long may it continue to expand and strengthen. Obviously, with lockdown, that saw, a brutal sort of hold on any sort of mentorships and internships programs that we had run. But they're now getting back up and running, and that's definitely an area where the studio is very focused on seeing to, because it's in our interest to have homegrown talents. I mean, again, we live in a world now where remote working is or hybrid working, let's say, is the norm. And in the past, pre-COVID, it was a nightmare to recruit, because you literally had to try and entice people, come to Scotland, come to Glasgow, and it's great here. And unless it really suited them, people just didn't want to move. They wanted to go to London because, again, it was easier to sort of jump from studio to studio. And, from a recruitment perspective as well, it's really hard to say to somebody, can you move for just, 4 to 6 months, while you're working on this trailer? Again, slightly easier to have that conversation if you've got a long form show where it's, they're engaged for a year, or more. But it was still, you weren't making these hiring decisions lightly, because that's people's lives, that you had to really take into consideration. Whereas, enter lockdown and the world just opened up for us. All of a sudden we had people who we'd worked with in the past, but, had to move away for whatever, family reasons or personal preference or whatever. And they were getting back in touch and going, hey, are you guys doing the remote thing? And we're like, come on back. So that was really fantastic. And it has continued. We nearly doubled in size overnight, with Scrooge going into production, but also just obviously the opportunities that really ended up coming our way, because we did have the capacity to service them. But it doesn't take away from the fact that we should be doing as much as we can to develop homegrown talent, to offer those opportunities. And I think for graduates and sort of more junior, there's nothing that, they need to be in the studio. They get so much out of learning, not only technically, but the interpersonal side of things as well, the teamwork side of things. There's just, you can't get that as well, I don't think, from a hybrid or remote situation. So I think that's maybe where we'll see, that increase in studio presence, to be able to bring sort of those more junior people and be able to give them that start in their careers that is as rich as we can make it.
Yeah, 100%. Is it harder or just the same, for you in terms of managing a production at scale with the hybrid model? So when you've got so many staff working offsite and remotely, does that is it a sort of increased challenge, or have you found it to be a change but not necessarily overly difficult change?
No, it's not been an overly difficult change personally, and again, I found that from my own circumstances, it was just such a life-changing situation. Before lockdown, I had already decided to sort of cut back to 4 days a week, and working one day from home, because my children were a lot younger then, and I was missing it, and I was starting to resent just the life decisions that I'd made and the choices that I'd made, and really question whether producing and being a senior sort of member of a studio of Axis's size was compatible with my lifestyle, and family comes first, and that's a philosophy that, again, I've stayed with Axis for so long, because they're incredibly supportive of that sort of that philosophy. And the studio's culture, it is, it's family friendly. It encourages, productivity, but it looks after its staff's well-being, because at the end of the day, if you've got a happy workforce, I certainly am more inclined to give back. I'll go out of my way because I know just how much sort of, this company has done for me when I've had to, call in and go, my kid's been taken to the hospital, I've got to be there, or it's some really scary stuff sometimes that you deal with as a parent. And, not even, you don't have to be a parent, like with pets and with your own, life choices. I think when it comes to these personal conflicts, it's really difficult to manage that with, a busy project workload and deadlines. But I have to say, like, everyone has always been nothing but supportive. And yeah, it's inconvenient sometimes that you've got to cover, but it goes both ways, So I do think it's important that we continue to support that sort of culture.
Yeah, 100%. It's I suppose it's kind of that way where we've kind of shifted from this idea that you have to be you have to be at your job 5 days a week, and it's it does feel like if you can give your team that sort of that feeling of trust, of basic kind of trust, of course, you're
Treat
going to do.
everybody as individuals,
Yeah.
Because everybody's circumstances are slightly different. And I think if we can afford that flexibility, I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to work for the studio. That's the bottom line, because we're a business. But, having that flexibility matters, and you see it pay off, when you can sort of give a little, and either staff retention or their productivity. But I do find, there's, when you have these face to face, maybe we have a production lunch, or, I go into the office like, once or twice a week. It's just so lovely. Nothing replaces that face to face. Your bonds just strengthen. So I am finding myself sort of having to just push myself to go in and be more present, be more visible to the team, because it matters, I think, at management level, to be seen and to be there, and for the team to know that they can count on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does, and Axis have always been good at supporting that culture, haven't they, in terms of just social events, and if there's a project that's happening, or a project that's finished, kind of doing showings of it and things like that. And I'm curious to know, though, how do you find that translates over to working with US based clients? Because obviously the US is notorious for work, get like 2 days off a year. I'm curious to know how does that then, do you find that US clients are kind of on a similar wavelength, or can there be is there more expectations from that side?
I mean, whether there's expectations or not, there's a reality that we live in, and at the end of the day, we just need to protect their interests and the interests of the project. If that's seen to, then they might not like it. I've never experienced sort of visible sort of frustrations, or been called about, this is just not acceptable. Sometimes it's inconvenient because there's holidays, but that's reality. That's the world that we live in, and the benefits that we offer. So good for us. I think it's each to their own. As long as we protect the interests of the project doesn't suffer, then people can have their opinions, but it's not going to change how we work as a studio.
Yeah, how you approach it. Yeah, absolutely. What are the sort of ambitions then from the Axis's point of view of your department? So, long form feature films. Obviously, you guys delivered Scrooge almost this time last year with Netflix. From what you're kind of saying so far, it's been a kind of long term ambition for the studio to, to establish themselves as a kind of a feature powerhouse. Is there any insight you can give us into, those kind of ambitions and long term plans for that division of Axis?
Yeah, world domination. No, we just want to keep making really great content, and ideally, it would be amazing to make an original. We do have a couple of developments that are originals, but obviously with the whole industry sort of slowed down a lot with the writers' strikes and the actor strikes. So I think we're going to have to be prepared for development. I mean, development's already slow, but it's going to crawl, for a little while longer, and just have enough, ideas spinning and development opportunities spinning that the right time will come for one of those, and we've got to jump on it. But in the meantime, we're still very much a service studio, and collaborations with either Netflix, Amazon, DreamWorks, Sony, whoever, it's on the table. We can offer a lot in terms of just pure animation execution, creative leadership, creative supervision. We just want to tell great stories, and I think that's how things are going to continue to be pushed, in that direction. We've got the short form stuff as well that is, constantly just making amazing stuff, and the visual effects side. So there's lots on the horizon. I don't see the studio sort of slowing down. It would be good for us just to kind of, let's stay where we are, kind of size wise, because every time there's something new and it means an expansion, it's not without some pain, because you've got to evolve your processes and you've got to just set up for those circumstances. But it's also really exciting, and most of us here love a challenge. So yeah, let's see what 2024 holds for us.
Brings along. Excellent. You mentioned something earlier which I thought was interesting, the idea of leadership versus management. Obviously this podcast is all about creative leadership. Do you have any sort of words of advice or just any kind of general insight into what you believe to be effective and great leadership in a creative role?
I think look after people, be of use, serve a purpose. You gotta have a purpose, and stick to your values, I guess, as an individual, because if you're true to your values, you will be fulfilled as an individual, which will make you, I think, a better leader or a better manager. I think always try to keep an open mind and that sort of growth mindset. I listen to a lot of leadership podcasts, and I enjoy them. As much for the things that it's not really my style. And I'll take that from it. But I am enjoying the sort of the people side now, whereas before it was all, I really enjoyed projects and leading projects, and I avoided management like the plague, because I was just like, I don't like people issues. And Whereas actually now, I don't know, maybe it's my age, maybe it's experience, I don't know, but I do find myself like being fulfilled by helping people, by helping situations, by wanting to support and to be of service. Um, and that's kind of it for me, as long as you can sort of stay true to those core values, you'll do okay, and you won't always get it right, but it's important to just, I think, shake it off and crack on.
Yeah. On the note of not always getting it right, looking back at different projects over the years, is there any kind of particular learnings that you've taken away? I'm thinking from like a case study point of view of, things that went well, things that haven't gone so well. I'm kind of, I guess, just that idea of, learning from failures is always something we try to tap into on this show. Is there anything looking back, case study wise?
Plenty. Plenty. No, I think trust your gut. I think a lot of the times I've been not, I think, swayed or led. I don't know. No, I've followed a particular path because I felt at the time that was the right thing to do. Knowing deep down it didn't feel quite right, and I think the more experience you get, the more you sort of you learn to sort of dig your heels in a bit, when those gut feelings really play up. But at the core of it, it's normally been, like something in the team casting that I haven't got quite right. We haven't been able to match up not appropriate, but the right mix of personalities, and there've been clashes where, again, you do your best, but also I've seen when those combinations that we took a risk on pay off, and it's just wonderful. I don't mind being proved wrong. Again, there's been times where I think healthy, positive conflict is super important in a production. Like whenever I've produced shows, it's been really important to have, a production manager or a CG suit that challenge me, and that, that we get the best out of each other. I push them, they push me. And, but you sort of have an understanding of when it matters or when it's really important to you, you say so. And, even if I don't agree with you, if it matters that much to you, okay, we'll try it out, or we'll pursue whatever it is. It's really important to be okay with getting it wrong. But the point is, don't worry about always being right. That's fine, just get it right in the end.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I used to worry a lot, back in the earlier days of Big Mouth Audio, that if you I guess, it's different when you're sort of hands on the tools for so much stuff. But it used to be a case of, if you did something and you poured your heart and soul into it, and then you got feedback of, no, that's not right, or we just don't need that, or, the idea of, I love that idea of positive conflict. That used to be difficult, or you would maybe be engaged in positive conflict and kind of during the process thinking, oh, this is, we're not going to work with this client again because, they hate us or something like that. And then you kind of realize at the end of the project that you get great feedback, or the project has delivered as it should. And it kind of feels like then the dust settles and everybody's kind of been through that process together. And then I suppose like feedback as well, between your teams and between your client and things like that. It's kind of sharing that knowledge, isn't it? And taking it on board, which we found over the years, working with various clients and yourself included, that, taking on that kind of feedback, positive and negative, and then implementing it just can have such an incredible impact on on your department or on your business or on your team performance.
Yeah, and it's not, it's not easy to hear sort of the constructive stuff. It can be really tough. But, I think I agree with you. It's so important to be open to feedback, but also seek feedback. How can I make this better? And how can we improve? But I think as well, another huge thing that I've come to sort of cope better with is the fact that you're not going to please everybody, and you can have the best of intentions in the world, and some people will just never accept or won't like how you're doing it or won't respect how you're doing it. Again, I'm not like, it's great to be liked, but I'm not really, if somebody doesn't like me, that's fine. But ultimately I do demand respect. Like, it's really, really important to be respectful in any sort of environment. Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard, knowing those boundaries as well.
Yeah, it comes with experience, I suppose, doesn't it? And trial and error. So a couple of questions left then. In terms of kind of standout projects or sort of career points, is there anything that you can share with us in terms of a particular project or something like that just kind of you look back on fondly, or something that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Monster High movies that we did with Mattel, so they were Axis's first, low budget feature. But I mean, we did 2 70-minute movies in 18 months. I mean, it was just crazy. But again, it was tough, but such an incredible team. It really made that experience. And the fact that at the time I had, a 5-6-year-old daughter who loved, came to love Monster High, and it was great. I think that paid off in so many levels. And, I thought, again, for the budget we had, and I thought that the movie looked great. I think the next one, Kiss Me First, again, an incredible experience, really quite tough as a production, just lots of challenges. But it's the team really, really made it, and there were, points in there that I was going to my head of production and being like, I don't think I can do this anymore, and having that support structure around you that believe in you and spur you on and get you through it, and I suppose that's what I'm trying to do for the people who I now manage is, watch out for them, keep encouraging them, keep supporting them, and keep developing them. And one of the best, most fun ones that sticks to my mind was working on the Lego series show. Again, perks as a job. We got to go to Lego, and it was just, it was difficult circumstances because we were launching series and we were trying to just tighten up on where we were on another of the series. So it was that sort of perfect mix of, oh my God, we're at Lego, this is so fun, and I'm a huge Lego fan, and my kids love Lego, and we can go to the Lego employee shop, and it was great. And then like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? The schedule's so tight, the budget's so tight, oh my God, so that sort of, that mix. But again, the team at Lego, the team at Passion Paris, and the team that we'd built up with the writers in LA and the pre-pro team here in the UK, it was really quite special. It felt special. And and now the Marvel series, which is again it's just a whole new level. but so exciting. And what the team's doing, it's, no short of just spectacular. It's beautiful, and they're absolutely killing it, absolutely smashing it. So can't wait to be sharing that, and hopefully getting any one of these development opportunities off the ground for the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Exciting times. I don't suppose there's any point asking for information on the Marvel series as to what it's about.
My head would be on a platter. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm not even. My husband sticks his head in the door, and I'm like, "See it? You can't.
Yeah.
You can't look."
5 locks in the door.
I know. Yeah, it's really tight on security, but
yeah,
our clients, they're a lovely, lovely bunch. Do you know? So it's about the journey. It's about the people. So
yeah, 100%.
The output is not half bad, is it?
No. Well, that's perfect timing, fella. I know you're not hugely familiar with the podcast, but so this might throw you off a little bit. But we always finish with the same question for every guest, and that is, if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be? And that is, it can be in your personal life, it can be in your career, it can be both. So I'll pass that one over to you.
I can be remembered just for I don't know, for being kind and being useful. It's just
that's fine.
Yeah. Don't know. It's the best I could do on the spot.
Yeah.
Fair.
Excellent. Well,
to be fair, and useful. There we go.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, fantastic. That's been a real pleasure to catch up with you, Paul. And I was really keen to get you on the show because I knew there'd be loads of really useful, insightful information on just how to manage the chaos of projects, not just in animation, but on the scale of the projects that Axis work on. So I know our audience will get loads of information and value from this. So so thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon in person.
All right, let's do that.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers.